The terrifying thing about powerful men is not how many enemies they have. It's how quietly they learn to live without hope. Snow drifted past the floor-to-ceiling windows of Bella Rosa like ash from a dying fire, soft white flakes disappearing against the black Manhattan skyline, while couples in designer coats stepped out of Escalades and town cars beneath the glowing red Valentine decorations lining Fifth Avenue. Inside the restaurant, crystal chandeliers shimmered above candlelit tables. Violins floated through the air in slow, melancholy waves, and every seat in the room had been filled for weeks except one. Table 14 remained untouched, reserved, protected almost like sacred ground. No hostess dared offer it to waiting guests no matter how crowded the restaurant became because everyone in Bella Rosa knew who it belonged to. Vincent Moretti sat alone beneath the dim amber light, one hand resting against a glass of whiskey that had long since gone warm. At 39 years old, he looked less like a businessman and more like the kind of man people crossed the street to avoid after midnight. His charcoal suit fit perfectly across broad shoulders hardened by years of tension instead of comfort, and silver had begun threading through the dark hair near his temples. Subtle evidence that stress eventually collected payment from everyone, even kings, especially kings. Around him, conversations stayed low. Waiters moved carefully. Nobody stared for too long. In New York, people whispered Vincent Moretti's name the same way Catholics whispered prayers during turbulence. Quietly, respectfully, fearfully. The most dangerous man in the city checked the restaurant entrance every 30 seconds like a man waiting for a miracle he no longer deserved. 11 years ago, Bella Rosa had been the place where senators bribed judges and billionaires celebrated acquisitions. Now people came hoping to catch a glimpse of Vincent Moretti in the corner booth near the windows, sitting beneath the soft gold lighting every Valentine's night without fail. Alone. He always reserved the table for two. He always ordered the same bottle of wine. And he always left before dessert untouched. By the woman who never arrived. Nobody knew why. The waitstaff had theories. Manhattan always did. Some said his wife died. Others claimed an old lover betrayed him and disappeared overseas with federal protection. One bartender swore Vincent once paid $500,000 to shut down an entire Brooklyn street because a woman he loved used to buy flowers there. But nobody dared ask him directly. Men like Vincent didn't survive to 39 by explaining themselves. At exactly 8:47 p.m., the maitre d' approached carefully, his posture stiff with nervous professionalism. "Mr. Moretti," he said quietly, "there's a situation with a reservation." Vincent didn't look away from the front door. "Then fix it." "Normally we would, sir, but the weather delayed several parties and we've overbooked the dining room. There's a woman waiting outside. She's been standing in the snow nearly 20 minutes. Vincent finally lifted his eyes, cold green, sharp enough to cut through excuses. "And," the maitre d' swallowed hard, "she says she doesn't mind sharing the table." Silence settled over the booth. Somewhere near the bar, a woman laughed too loudly before immediately stopping herself. Vincent slowly leaned back in his chair, thumb brushing once against the rim of his whiskey glass. "Nobody sits at this table." "I understand, sir." "I told her that." "Then why are we still having this conversation?" The maitre d' hesitated. "Because she said something strange." Vincent's expression didn't change. "What?" "She said." The older man glanced nervously toward the entrance. "She said anyone who stares at the door that long probably isn't waiting for dinner." For the first time that night, something flickered behind Vincent Moretti's eyes. Not anger, something far more dangerous. Recognition. Then the front door opened, cold February wind sweeping through Bella Rosa as a woman in a red wool coat stepped inside carrying snow across the marble floor, while every man in the restaurant instinctively turned to look at her. And Vincent Moretti forgot to breathe. Every person in Bella Rosa reacted to the woman in the red coat the same way people react to sudden thunder. Quiet first, then nervous. Snow melted slowly along the shoulders of her wool coat as she closed the heavy glass door behind her, blinking against the warm golden light inside the restaurant. She looked out of place among the diamonds and tailored tuxedos filling the room. Not because she was unattractive, because she looked real. Her blonde hair was loosely pinned back like she had fixed it inside a taxi using instinct instead of a mirror, and her cheeks were flushed pink from the February cold still clinging to Manhattan outside. She held leather gloves in one hand and a canvas tote bag in the other, the kind teachers or bookstore employees carried home after long shifts. Vincent watched her quietly from across the room while every survival instinct he had sharpened over 20 years told him to stand up and leave immediately. Instead, he stayed frozen in the booth. The woman glanced toward the crowded dining room, clearly embarrassed by the attention suddenly aimed at her. Then her eyes landed on Vincent. Not on the expensive watch resting beneath his cuff. Not on the bodyguards near the back wall pretending not to watch her. Just his face. Tired eyes met tired eyes across Bella Rosa. "I am really sorry about this," she said as she approached the table slowly. Her voice carried the rough softness of someone who had spent all day talking over city noise. The hostess said the city is basically buried in snow right now and every restaurant south of Central Park is backed up at least 2 hours. Vincent said nothing. Up close, she looked maybe 28 or 29. No wedding ring. Light freckles near the bridge of her nose. The kind of face that became more beautiful the longer you looked at it. Dangerous in an entirely different way. "I can leave if you want," she added carefully when he did not respond. "Honestly, I was mostly joking." The maitre d' looked seconds away from cardiac arrest. Vincent finally spoke without emotion. "Nobody jokes with me in this restaurant." Instead of shrinking back like most people did, the woman tilted her head slightly. "That sounds exhausting." One of Vincent's security men near the wall almost moved forward before Vincent lifted too. Fingers subtly beneath the table. "Stand down." The woman noticed the gesture. Smart enough to understand immediately what kind of room she had walked into. Most people would have apologized by now. Or panicked. She only pulled off her gloves slowly and looked toward the untouched second wine glass sitting across from Vincent. Someone was supposed to be here. It was not a question. Vincent stared at her for several long seconds. Outside, snow continued falling against the dark Manhattan skyline, while violin music drifted softly through the room like smoke. 7 years, he said quietly. Her expression shifted almost imperceptibly. That is a long time to wait for someone. Not if you owe them something. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. She glanced toward the door like she was debating whether to leave before stepping deeper into something she did not understand. Then the hostess hurried over with another candle and menu, relieved enough to nearly cry. "Miss Bennett, thank you so much for understanding the situation tonight." Vincent's eyes sharpened slightly. "Bennett. Claire Bennett." The hostess rushed away before silence could settle too heavily between them. Claire slowly sat down across from him, setting her tote bag carefully beside the booth. "For the record," she said gently, "I still have no idea who you are." A faint laugh almost escaped one of the waiters nearby before immediately dying in his throat. Vincent leaned back against the leather booth, studying her with the same calm intensity people used around open flames. "That makes you the only person in Manhattan." Claire looked around the restaurant again, finally noticing how everyone avoided eye contact with their table. The low whispers, the tension, the staff watching from a distance. Her fingers tightened once around the cloth napkin in her lap. "Okay," she admitted softly. "That part is starting to feel a little creepy." Vincent should have ended the conversation there. Should have stood up, paid the check, walked back into the snow and forgotten her face before it became dangerous to remember. But then Claire looked toward the empty wine glass again and asked the one question nobody had dared ask him in 7 years. "Did she die?" she said quietly. "Or did she leave?" And for the first time that night, Vincent Moretti looked away from the door. The silence after Claire's question stretched across the table like thin ice over deep water. Vincent did not answer immediately. He simply stared out beyond the restaurant windows where snow covered the sidewalks of Manhattan in soft white layers that made the city look cleaner than it really was. Claire suddenly became aware of how dangerous the man across from her might actually be. Not because he raised his voice. Quite the opposite. Men who needed fear rarely whispered. "That depends." Vincent finally said, his voice low and even. On whether you think those are different things. Claire felt a strange ache settle in her chest before she could stop it. She had not expected sadness. Fear, maybe. Arrogance, definitely. But not this quiet exhaustion hanging around him like smoke after a fire. A waiter appeared beside the table almost instantly, nervous enough to spill water while refilling her glass. Vincent never looked at him. Bring her whatever she wants. Claire glanced down at the menu she could not afford even on a good week. Honestly, I am okay with coffee. The waiter looked horrified. Vincent looked mildly annoyed. Nobody comes to Bella Rosa for coffee. Maybe nobody normal does. Something dangerous flickered briefly at the corner of Vincent's mouth. Not quite a smile. More like the memory of one. You keep using that word around me. Claire folded her gloves carefully beside the plate. Normal. As if you still believe it exists in New York. She almost answered automatically before stopping herself. Because the truth was she had stopped believing that a long time ago too. New York had a way of exhausting hope out of people slowly instead of all at once. Rent climbed higher. Trains got louder. Relationships got shorter. Everyone learned how to survive before they learned how to sleep. I teach second grade in Brooklyn, Claire said quietly after a moment. Trust me, tiny humans still think the world is fixable. Vincent studied her face with unsettling attention. And you? He asked. Do you think it is fixable? Claire opened her mouth before realizing she did not actually know the answer anymore. Earlier that morning she had spent 40 minutes scraping ice off her 15-year-old Honda before driving through snowstorms to a school where half the ceiling leaked whenever it rained. 2 weeks ago her landlord raised the rent again. Last month, her ex-fiancé mailed back the engagement ring without a note after disappearing from her life for nearly a year. Somewhere between all of that, she had stopped expecting things to get better and started settling for manageable disappointment. Some days, she admitted softly. Vincent nodded once like he understood more than she intended to reveal. Around them, Bella Rosa continued glowing with Valentine warmth. Candlelight danced across crystal glasses. Couples leaned close together whispering promises they probably meant tonight and would forget by summer. A pianist near the back corner began playing something slow and old that made the room feel heavier somehow. Claire noticed Vincent's eyes shift toward the music for half a second before hardening again. You hate this holiday, she observed quietly. No, he swirled the whiskey once inside his glass. I hate what people pretend it means. Which is temporary honesty. Claire frowned slightly. That sounds incredibly cynical. It is accurate. You always this cheerful? Another near smile. Smaller this time. More dangerous because it looked unfamiliar on him. One of the security men near the wall stepped forward suddenly, leaning down beside Vincent with tense posture. Sir, he murmured carefully. There is an issue outside. Vincent's entire expression changed instantly. Warmth vanished. Shoulders tightened. Claire watched the transformation happen in real time, like someone locking steel doors behind his eyes. Handle it, Vincent said coldly. Already trying to. Paparazzi spotted your car. Claire blinked. Paparazzi. Her gaze slowly lifted toward Vincent again as pieces finally clicked together inside her mind. The fear from the staff. The security. The whispers. The untouched table every Valentine. Wait, she said, quietly. You are that Vincent Moretti? The guard froze. The entire booth seemed to go still. Vincent dismissed the man with one glance before turning back toward Claire. Depends who is asking. Claire stared at him for several long seconds before letting out one soft breath. You know what is weird? She murmured. I thought you would look more evil. For the first time in 7 years, Vincent Moretti laughed out loud. The sound caught everyone off guard because it did not belong to men like Vincent Moretti. It was not loud, not dramatic, just one short laugh that escaped before he could stop it. Rough from disuse like an old piano key finally touched after years collecting dust. Even Claire looked surprised by it. The tension around the table shifted almost immediately. Not gone, just changed shape. Careful, Vincent said quietly, swirling the whiskey in his glass again. That opinion could get you in trouble around here. Claire leaned slightly against the leather booth, studying him beneath the warm candlelight. You know what I think? That sounds dangerous already. I think everyone around you is so busy being afraid that nobody talks to you like a person anymore. One of the bodyguards near the wall visibly stiffened. Vincent noticed it without turning his head. You hear that, Matteo? He said calmly. Apparently I have become a victim. The guard looked deeply uncomfortable. Claire smiled faintly for the first time that evening, and Vincent realized something unsettling in that exact moment. He had spent 7 years avoiding rooms that felt alive. Bella Rosa had become ritual, punishment, a yearly reminder that grief aged slower than people did. But somehow this stranger in the red coat had sat down at his table and disrupted the carefully controlled silence he had built around himself brick by brick. It irritated him more than it should have. So what actually happens now? Claire asked after the waiter placed fresh pasta in front of her with trembling hands. Do I accidentally end up on some kind of Mafia watch list because of dinner? You were on one the second you sat down. She paused halfway, reaching for her fork. Vincent took a slow sip of whiskey before adding calmly, That was a joke. You really need to work on how you deliver those. Another flicker of amusement touched his expression. Claire finally tasted the pasta and closed her eyes briefly. Okay, that is annoyingly good. Most expensive thing on the menu. That explains it. Vincent watched her carefully while she ate, noticing details he should not have noticed. The tiny crease between her eyebrows whenever she thought too hard. The way she rubbed warmth back into her fingers after coming in from the cold. The exhaustion hidden beneath her calm expression. Not weakness, weariness. New York wore people down differently depending on how much money they had. Rich people became colder. Poor people became tired. You really teach second grade? He asked after a moment. Claire nodded. Brooklyn Heights Elementary. That sounds miserable. It pays terribly, she corrected. The children are usually the best part. Usually? Claire laughed softly under her breath. Last week one of them asked if I was alive during the 1900s. Something shifted again behind Vincent's eyes. Softer this time. More human. He could not remember the last conversation he had where nobody wanted money, favors, access, protection, or fear from him. Claire wanted absolutely nothing. That alone made her dangerous. And you? She asked carefully. What do you actually do all day when you are not terrifying Manhattan? Vincent leaned back slightly as if considering whether honesty still existed between strangers. Meetings mostly. That sounds suspiciously normal. It is mostly accountants and lawyers disappointing me. See? Human. Vincent looked down at the candle flickering between them. You should stop trying to make me one. Claire's smile faded slightly at the quiet seriousness in his voice. Outside, snow continued falling thicker now, coating parked cars and sidewalks in heavy white layers, while traffic crawled slowly beneath glowing streetlights. The storm had swallowed most of Manhattan whole. Bella Rosa suddenly felt isolated from the rest of the world. Warm, temporary, unsafe in the strangest way. Claire noticed Vincent glance toward the entrance again. Same rhythm as before. Every 30 seconds. Like muscle memory. You still think she might walk in? She said softly. Vincent did not answer immediately. The pianist near the back changed songs again. Something older now. Sadder. No, he admitted quietly. I think part of me wants to be punished for hoping. Claire looked at him for a long moment after that. No fear anymore. No fascination either. Just recognition. Like she understood loneliness better than she wanted to admit. Then her phone buzzed suddenly against the table. The screen lit up beside her wine glass. Ethan calling. Vincent's eyes dropped to the name automatically. Claire reached for the phone too fast and silenced it immediately, but not before Vincent noticed the subtle tension tighten across her face. Boyfriend? He asked calmly. Claire stared down at the dark screen for a second too long. Not anymore. Vincent nodded once like he understood breakage when he heard it. Then the phone buzzed again almost instantly. And this time, Claire looked genuinely afraid to answer it. The phone vibrated a third time against the white tablecloth, loud enough now that even the couple seated nearby glanced over briefly before pretending not to notice. Claire stared at the screen like it might explode if she touched it. Ethan calling. Again. Vincent watched her expression carefully, reading tension the same way other men read weather reports. "You should answer it," he said quietly. Claire shook her head too fast. "It is fine. People rarely look terrified of things that are fine." Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. For a second, Vincent thought she might lie. Instead, she exhaled slowly and muted the phone completely before dropping it into her purse. "He just does not understand when things are over." Vincent leaned back slightly in the booth, eyes steady on her face. "And you do." Claire gave a tired little laugh without humor. "I teach 7-year-olds all day. Trust me. I am very familiar with emotional immaturity." Another near smile touched Vincent's mouth before fading again. Outside, snow whipped harder against the restaurant windows now, blurring Manhattan into soft white streaks of light and shadow. More guests were staying longer than planned because the storm had become nearly impossible to drive through safely. Bella Rosa felt suspended outside normal time. Warm, quiet, temporary. Claire reached for her wine glass finally. "This is probably the strangest Valentine's dinner I have ever had." Vincent glanced toward the untouched place setting across from him. "That makes 2 of us." The pianist shifted into another slow melody near the back corner, and Claire noticed something she had missed earlier. Every employee in the restaurant kept their distance from Vincent physically, but emotionally too. Nobody interrupted him unless necessary. Nobody laughed near him naturally. Nobody relaxed. The entire room bent itself around his existence. It looked lonely in a way expensive things often did. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said carefully. Vincent nodded once. "Why keep coming back here?" He looked toward the candle flickering between them. "Routine." "No," Claire shook her head gently. "Routine is buying the same coffee every morning. This feels more like punishment." Silence settled between them again. Vincent usually hated silence with strangers because it invited questions. But with Claire, silence felt oddly honest. 7 years ago, he said finally. "There was supposed to be a dinner here." Claire listened quietly. "She called me at 6:13 that evening and said she would be late." His thumb brushed once along the side of the whiskey glass. "I remember the exact time because I ignored the call." Claire felt her chest tighten slightly. "Why?" Vincent stared out at the storm beyond the windows. "Because I was angry. About work." The word sounded hollow coming from him somehow. "I told myself I would call her back after the meeting." Claire already knew where the story was going before he finished it. Sometimes grief arrived in a room long before names did. "But you never got the chance," she whispered. Vincent did not answer directly. He only reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out an old voicemail card folded carefully beneath years of wear. Not a photograph. Not jewelry. Just paper. Softened from being handled too many times. "Technology changes," he murmured quietly. "But somehow pain always finds a way to survive upgrades." Claire looked down at the card without touching it. "You still listen to it?" "Every Valentine's Day." There was no self-pity in his voice. That was the worst part. Just acceptance. Like a man carrying something heavy for so long he forgot life existed without it. Claire swallowed hard. "Vincent, do not." His voice stayed calm, but firmer now. "Do not feel sorry for me. I earned every lonely room I have ever walked into." Before Claire could answer, her phone lit up again inside her purse. This time the vibration did not stop. Message after message after message. Vincent's eyes lowered briefly toward the sound. Claire pulled the phone out reluctantly. 6 missed calls now. 3 new texts. "Ethan, I know you are ignoring me. Ethan, we need to talk tonight. Ethan, who are you with?" Vincent's expression changed subtly when he saw the last message. Not anger. Calculation. "He tracks you." Claire locked the phone immediately. It is complicated. No, Vincent said softly. Complicated is tax law. Fear is usually very simple. Claire looked down at her untouched wine glass instead of answering. Across the restaurant, one of Vincent's security men approached again with careful urgency. Sir, Matteo murmured low enough for only Vincent to hear. Someone has been sitting outside in a black SUV for the last 20 minutes. Claire's face lost color instantly. Vincent noticed. Claire's reaction lasted less than a second, but Vincent saw it clearly. The sudden stiffness in her shoulders. The color draining slightly from her face. The instinctive glance toward the front windows of Bella Rosa, where snow continued swirling beneath the streetlights outside. Fear recognized something before logic could catch up. Matteo noticed it too. You know the vehicle? He asked carefully. Claire shook her head immediately. Too quickly. Vincent leaned back slowly in the booth, watching her with the calm focus of a man who had spent most of his life studying lies for survival. Claire. His voice stayed quiet. Look at me. She did after a moment, though reluctantly. Is it him? Her fingers tightened around the edge of the tablecloth. I do not know. Vincent's expression hardened slightly. That is not an answer. Claire looked down toward her purse where her phone sat silent now after the flood of messages. Ethan has been showing up places lately, she admitted softly. Outside my apartment. Near the school. Coffee shops. Matteo shifted subtly beside the table. Vincent stayed perfectly still. Somehow that was worse. You reported this? Vincent asked. Claire gave a tired little laugh. To who? The police told me unless he actually threatens me directly, there is not much they can do. Outside, headlights moved faintly through the heavy snowfall beyond the windows. The city looked blurred now, distant and cold. Vincent glanced toward Matteo once. That was enough. The bodyguard disappeared silently toward the entrance. Claire watched him go with growing unease. What is he doing? Finding out whether your problem becomes mine. The bluntness of the answer startled her. You make that sound terrifyingly casual. It is New York, Vincent replied evenly. Most dangerous things here start casually. Claire should have left then. Every instinct told her that sitting in a snowstorm inside a Manhattan restaurant with a man rumored to control half the city's criminal underworld was objectively the worst decision of her adult life. But when she looked at Vincent now, she no longer saw the myth people whispered about. She saw a man who noticed fear instantly because he carried so much of it himself. Just better hidden. He was not always like this, Claire said quietly after a long silence. Vincent listened without interrupting. Ethan used to be... She searched for the right word before giving up. Normal. A humorless smile touched her lips briefly. I guess everybody says that. People rarely introduce themselves honestly. Claire looked down at the candle between them. We were engaged for almost 2 years. Then last spring he lost his job. Things changed after that. Vincent's eyes remained steady on her face. Changed how? She hesitated. He became angry all the time. Suspicious. If I stayed late. Grading papers, he thought I was lying. If I went out with coworkers, he showed up unexpectedly. Her voice stayed calm, but Vincent noticed how carefully she chose each word. Like someone trying not to make a situation sound worse than it had felt living through it. Last month, I finally ended it. And he disagreed. Claire nodded once. Across the restaurant, couples continued laughing softly over candlelit desserts, completely unaware of the storm gathering quietly around table 14. The pianist kept playing. Glasses clinked gently. Bella Rosa still looked warm and romantic to everyone except the 2 people sitting inside the corner booth. Matteo returned several minutes later, snow melting across the shoulders of his dark coat. He leaned down beside Vincent carefully. Vehicle is registered to Ethan Walker, 34 years old. Queen's address. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Vincent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Still outside. Yes, sir. Alone. As far as we can tell. Claire looked toward Vincent immediately. Please do not do anything. He turned toward her slowly. You think I am going to have him dragged into an alley because he cannot handle rejection? Honestly, Claire swallowed. I have absolutely no idea what people like you do. Something unreadable passed through Vincent's eyes at that. Not anger. Weariness, maybe. People like me, he said quietly, usually spend their lives becoming the exact thing women learn to fear walking home at night. Claire stared at him across the flickering candlelight. But, he looked toward the snowstorm outside the windows. But tonight I am trying very hard not to be that man anymore. The honesty in his voice unsettled her more than threats would have. Then Vincent stood slowly from the booth, buttoning his charcoal coat with practiced calm, while the entire restaurant instinctively fell quieter around him. Claire's heartbeat quickened immediately. Where are you going? Vincent looked down at her, green eyes steady and cold again for the first time all evening. To have a conversation, he said softly. And pray your Ethan knows how to listen. Claire stood immediately when Vincent stepped away. From the booth, panic flashing across her face fast enough that several nearby diners looked over again before quickly looking away. Vincent, she said under her breath, trying to keep her voice calm. Please do not turn this into something bigger. He paused beside the table, one hand resting against the back of the leather booth, while snowstorm light flickered softly through the restaurant windows behind him. You think I enjoy making scenes? Claire looked at him carefully. I think men who are used to control sometimes forget what fear feels like to everyone else. The words landed harder than she intended. Vincent went still for half a second. Not angry, just quiet in the way dangerous weather becomes quiet before changing direction. Around them, Bella Rosa continued pretending nothing unusual was happening. Waiters carried wine bottles between tables. Silverware clinked softly against expensive china. Somewhere near the bar, a woman laughed too loudly at something unfunny. New York had always mastered the art of ignoring uncomfortable truths in public. Vincent buttoned his coat slowly. Stay here, he said. Claire crossed her arms immediately. That is not happening. One dark eyebrow lifted slightly. You plan to follow me into a snowstorm to confront your unstable ex-boyfriend? I plan to stop this from becoming a bad Lifetime movie. Matteo looked physically distressed listening to the conversation. Vincent almost smiled again despite himself. You think very strangely under pressure. Occupational hazard. Second graders throw chairs sometimes. For one brief moment, Vincent simply stared at her. Claire realized then how tired he looked up close. Not physically, spiritually, like a man who had spent years carrying things nobody else could see anymore. Fine, he said quietly. You come with me, but you stay behind me. Claire grabbed her red coat from the booth before he could change his mind. The moment they stepped outside Bella Rosa, February cold hit them hard enough to steal breath instantly. Snow whipped sideways across Fifth Avenue beneath glowing streetlights while traffic crawled slowly through the storm like exhausted insects trapped in ice. Vincent barely reacted to the weather. Claire immediately regretted not wearing thicker boots. Across the street, a black SUV idled beneath a flickering traffic light, exhaust curling upward into the freezing air. Claire recognized the vehicle instantly. That is him, she whispered. Vincent glanced toward her without turning his head fully. Stay beside Matteo. Then he crossed the street calmly through the falling snow, hands in his coat pockets like a man walking toward a business meeting instead of confrontation. Claire watched Ethan climb out of the SUV almost immediately. Even from a distance, she could see tension radiating off him. 34 years old. Brown jacket. Snow collecting in dark hair already damp from the storm. He looked exhausted too, but differently. Frantic instead of empty. Claire, Ethan called across the street, ignoring Vincent entirely at first. You have been ignoring me for hours. Claire stepped forward instinctively before Matteo gently blocked her path with one arm. Vincent stopped several feet from Ethan, posture relaxed enough to feel unnatural. You have been following her. Ethan finally noticed him fully. Recognition spread slowly across his face, followed almost instantly by confusion. Who the hell are you? Snow drifted between them while traffic hissed softly nearby over wet pavement. Vincent's voice stayed calm. Someone asking you politely to go home. Ethan laughed once under his breath, nervous and defensive at the same time. This is none of your business. It became my business when you started frightening her. Claire saw Ethan's jaw tighten immediately. I am trying to fix my relationship. No, Vincent said softly. You are trying to control the ending of it. The street suddenly felt very quiet despite the city noise around them. Ethan looked toward Claire again. Is this seriously what this is? You disappear all night and end up with some rich midtown creep? Claire flinched slightly at the anger rising in his voice. Vincent noticed. Careful, he murmured. Ethan stepped forward immediately. Or what? Matteo shifted behind Claire. Every muscle in Vincent's body seemed to settle colder somehow, though his expression never changed. Or you continue proving her right for leaving. Ethan opened his mouth again before stopping suddenly. Because for the first time that evening, he truly looked at the man standing in front of him. Really looked. The expensive coat, the bodyguards, the unnatural calm. Then recognition hit him all at once beneath the falling snow. Claire watched the exact moment color disappeared from Ethan's face. Jesus Christ, he whispered. Vincent said nothing. Ethan stared at him another second before taking one slow step backward instinctively. Claire, he said carefully now. Who is this guy? But Claire was no longer looking at Ethan. She was staring at Vincent instead, because for the first time all night, she finally understood why the entire city feared him. Snow collected along Vincent's shoulders without him seeming to notice. The storm swallowed most of Manhattan in white silence now, muting traffic and softening the glow of storefront lights along Fifth Avenue until the entire city looked unreal. Ethan stood frozen beside the black SUV, breathing unevenly as recognition settled deeper across his face. Claire could almost see the exact moment fear replaced anger. You are Vincent Moretti, Ethan said carefully, like speaking the name too loudly might trigger something irreversible. Vincent kept both hands in his coat pockets. Calm. Controlled. That is what people call me. Ethan glanced between them in disbelief. Claire, what the hell is this? Claire opened her mouth, then stopped, because she did not fully understand either. 2 hours ago, she had only been trying to escape a snowstorm and a crowded city on Valentine's night. Now she was standing in the middle of Fifth Avenue beside the most feared man in New York while her ex-fiancé looked like he wanted to disappear through the pavement. I came to dinner, she said quietly. Ethan laughed once under his breath, but there was no humor in it anymore. Dinner. His eyes shifted toward Vincent again. Do you even know who this guy is? Vincent answered before Claire could. Enough. His voice stayed low, but the air around them seemed to tighten anyway. Ethan swallowed visibly. Claire hated that reaction instantly, not because Ethan had become frightening earlier, because now he looked small, broken in a completely different way. I never wanted to scare you, Ethan said suddenly, looking directly at Claire again. Snow melted slowly into his hair and jacket while exhaustion hollowed out his face beneath the streetlights. I could not understand how everything ended so fast. Claire felt something painful twist quietly inside her chest, because she remembered loving him once. That was the cruel thing about heartbreak. Even after fear arrived, memory still defended people sometimes. It did not end fast, she said softly. You just stopped listening before it ended. Ethan stared at her for several seconds while snow drifted between them. I lost my job, he murmured. Everything fell apart after that. No, Claire replied gently. You fell apart after that. The honesty in her voice hurt more than anger could have. Vincent remained silent beside her, watching the conversation unfold with unreadable eyes. For the first time all evening, Claire realized he understood this kind of collapse intimately. Not Ethan's exactly, but the slow destruction pride caused inside lonely men who no longer knew how to ask for help without turning cruel first. Ethan rubbed both hands over his face roughly. I know I messed things up. Claire noticed then how tired he looked too. Not dangerous anymore. Just lost. Showing up outside my apartment was not okay, she said quietly. Following me was not okay. Ethan nodded once. Snow crunched softly beneath his boots as he looked down toward the street. I know. Vincent finally spoke again. Then hear this part carefully. Ethan looked up immediately. Vincent stepped slightly closer, not threatening. Somehow that made it more intimidating. You are going to leave her alone after tonight. His tone never changed. No raised voice. No dramatic threat. Just certainty. No calls. No showing up unexpectedly. No trying to force conversations she already ended. Ethan nodded immediately. Okay. Vincent studied him for another second. If you are struggling, get help. Speak to someone. But do not mistake obsession for love again. Claire looked sharply toward Vincent after that, because the words had not sounded rehearsed. They sounded personal. Ethan seemed to notice it too. His shoulders lowered slightly beneath the falling snow. You really care about her? He asked quietly. The question lingered strangely in the cold air. Vincent did not answer right away. Claire's heartbeat quickened unexpectedly, while Manhattan glowed dim and white around them. Finally Vincent looked toward her, green eyes softer than before, more honest. I barely know her, he admitted. But she deserves to feel safe walking through her own city. Something inside Claire cracked quietly at those words, because nobody had said that to her in a very long time. Ethan looked at her one final time before slowly stepping backward toward the SUV. I am sorry, Claire. She believed he meant it this time. That was the saddest part. He climbed back inside the vehicle moments later and drove away slowly through the storm until the taillights disappeared completely into the white Manhattan night. Silence settled over the sidewalk again. Matteo stepped back discreetly toward the restaurant entrance, giving them space without being asked. Claire exhaled shakily, watching snow gather along the sleeves of Vincent's dark coat. You could have destroyed him back there, she whispered. Vincent looked out toward the empty street where the SUV had vanished. 7 years ago, he said quietly, someone begged me not to become the kind of man who mistakes power for strength. Claire stared at him carefully beneath the falling snow. And tonight, Vincent finally looked back at her. Tonight, he admitted softly, I almost remembered how to listen. 1 year later, Manhattan looked exactly the same on Valentine's night. Snow drifted softly across Fifth Avenue beneath glowing restaurant signs while black cars crawled through evening traffic and couples hurried along sidewalks wrapped in scarves and borrowed promises. The city never changed for heartbreak. It only learned how to decorate around it. Inside Bella Rosa, candles flickered against crystal glasses exactly the way they had the year before. The same violin music floated through the dining room. The same table near the windows remained reserved under the name Moretti. But for the first time in 8 years, Vincent arrived alone without grief sitting beside him first. The hostess nearly dropped the reservation book when he walked through the front doors. He still carried that same quiet gravity around him, the kind that made rooms instinctively lower their voices without understanding why. But something about him had changed too. Softer edges maybe, less ghost. Matteo noticed it months ago, so had the staff inside Bella Rosa. Vincent no longer stayed until closing staring at empty wine glasses. He no longer listened to the voicemail every night after midnight. Some wounds never disappeared completely, but they stopped bleeding eventually if a person stopped reopening them out of habit. Vincent removed his dark coat slowly while snow melted along the shoulders. The maitre d' approached carefully. Your usual table, Mr. Moretti? Vincent glanced toward the corner booth beside the windows. Candlelight flickered softly across the untouched place, setting waiting there out of routine more than expectation now. He looked at it for several seconds before shaking his head once. Not tonight. Confusion crossed the older man's face. Sir. Vincent reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded reservation card softened from years of handling. The voicemail card rested behind it, older now, less sacred somehow. Cancel the reservation permanently. The maitre d' stared at him like he had spoken another language. Are you certain? Vincent looked out beyond the restaurant windows where snow covered Manhattan in white silence. Yes. The word felt strange leaving his mouth. like setting down something heavy after forgetting life allowed it. 20 minutes later, Vincent stood alone on a quieter Brooklyn street beneath soft snowfall, hands buried in the pockets of his charcoal coat, while warm light glowed from a small flower shop across the road. Bennett Flowers. The sign looked slightly crooked near the front window because Claire insisted imperfections made places feel honest. Vincent remembered the exact moment she had said that 6 months earlier while arranging white roses and pretending not to notice him lingering nearby after closing. He crossed the street slowly. Inside the shop, soft jazz played low through hidden speakers, while fresh eucalyptus and roses scented the warm air. Claire stood behind the counter wrapping flowers for a late customer. Blonde hair loosely tied back the same careless way she always wore it when tired. She looked up when the bell above the door rang. Then she smiled. Small at first, real second. Vincent had learned over the past year that no amount of power prepared a man for what relief felt like when someone was genuinely happy to see him. "You are late," Claire said softly. Vincent glanced toward the old wall clock. 3 minutes. For you, that is practically reckless. He stepped closer through the warm golden light of the flower shop, while snow continued drifting outside the windows behind him. Claire noticed immediately that something was different tonight. Not his suit, not the expensive watch. His posture, maybe. Lighter somehow. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Vincent looked around the little shop filled with flowers, half-finished bouquets, handwritten notes from customers, and the comfortable chaos of a normal life he once would have walked past without noticing. Then he reached into his coat and placed the old voicemail card gently on the counter between them. Claire stared down at it in surprise. "Vincent, I listened to it this morning." His voice stayed calm, but softer than before. "For the first time, I heard the ending clearly." Claire looked up slowly. Vincent met her eyes. She said life was too short to spend it punishing myself for surviving. Snow tapped softly against the windows while the jazz record crackled low in the background. Claire reached across the counter carefully, her fingers brushing his hand once. Warm, steady, real. Vincent looked down at their hands together for a moment longer than necessary. "Do you know something strange?" he murmured quietly. Claire smiled faintly. "With you? Always." A rare smile touched his face fully this time. Unhidden. Human. "For years," he admitted softly, "I thought losing her was the thing that broke me." Claire squeezed his hand gently. "And now?" Vincent looked at her standing there beneath warm flower shop light while snow buried Brooklyn quietly outside. "Now I think surviving without letting anyone close again was what almost destroyed me." Claire's eyes softened instantly at the honesty in his voice. Vincent Moretti had once terrified an entire city because nobody believed men like him could change. But standing inside that tiny flower shop on Valentine's night, with snow falling softly beyond the windows and Claire Bennett smiling at him across fresh roses and candlelight, he finally understood something simple enough to save a life. The most dangerous thing about lonely men was never their power. It was how long they believed they deserved to stay lonely forever.